Hey, Walt, in case you were wondering, we could broadcast for 8 hours.
8 hours.
I'm not going to try it, but we could if
Pee
we wanted
break.
to. Well, one of us could just talk while the other one goes and pees.
Nice.
The wives won't be very happy with us, but
Right. Unless it's between the hours of 11 and 6, then we're good.
that's true. That's true. But we'd be really tired the next day. Hey, guess what? We should probably start the show.
Yay.
We're only 25 minutes late. Yeah, 25. This is LinuxInstall.net episode number 127. We are recording on Tuesday, September 16th, 2014. My name is Brian Wagner. With me, as always, my newly minted faithful co-host, Walt Jevack.
Yay. Spot hosting.
Spot hosted.
Yeah, the
Spot
faithful
hosted.
position.
Oh, Joe's being lame tonight. He's got something else to do. Whatever, because the show's not important to him. Because it's not about gaming.
Most likely.
Yeah. So, what you been up to this week, Walt?
Yeah, I've been compiling stuff from my little sharp ZAURUS and OpenBSD.
That's right.
not
You
quite,
heard it here,
not quite
folks.
Linux, but pretty close.
Yeah. Walt's compiling stuff on a
Yeah.
really slow processor.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we were talking. The average, I think the fastest thing I compiled was 4 hours. And the longest one so far was a day and a half. I don't know exactly when it finished. I just quit looking at it. Um,
There's a time command. You could hit time, and then it'll tell you how long it took to do whatever it was.
yeah, I didn't really care anymore.
No, I
What?
mean, like, you type in time, space, whatever the command is, and then it'll time the command and then tell you
Oh, true.
how long
True.
it took.
The what it ends up being is in OpenBSD there's what they call the ports project,
Uh-huh.
and you can go to you download this big tar zip of all the ports that are available, and then you go into a folder and it has the make file and everything, a list of all the dependencies necessary in order for that application to compile and run. And if you go choose to compile it, it will first search for all the dependencies. If they don't exist, it will pull those down and compile those first. And that's basically what takes most of the time, is if you don't have the dependencies, it has to do all those in addition to whatever program you're really trying to do. So like a good example, I did, I think it was Lighty, and I compiled that, and it did a bunch of dependencies. And then, oh, that's right. And then I tried doing PHP 5, and that's the one that went for a day and a half. And its dependencies were Apache, some SQL database, like all this stuff that you really don't need for PHP. So I'm not really sure why that is as it was, but I didn't realize it at the time, and I just let it run. So I got all kinds of cool back-end dependencies built. It got to the database build and failed. So I never really did. I never actually got PHP compiled because it couldn't finish the dependencies. But then I went back and I compiled links, wget, and Axel, and all of those are web-based. And because I had all those dependencies done, it took him like a minute and a half. It was basically next to nothing because I just went through the whole list of yep, got it, yep, got it, yep, got it, and then the one compile. But then I went back and I made Nano because I don't like using VI because I'm lazy now. And that took a long time because it had a bunch of the language dependencies and stuff that weren't regular. But then I went back and did a couple other editors, and they were again much quicker. But yeah, it's been fun.
It's
We
funny.
ran into a couple problems and actually sent some feedback to the OpenBSD guys, and they just kind of laughed and said, "You're compiling on what for what?" And I'm like, "ARM on a ZAURUS. It's officially supported." But they didn't really care.
I see. So wait a minute. We have to have a Nano Vi discussion here. So you're on Nano because why?
Because I'm lazy and it works easier.
See, and I disagree because I'm on Vi because it works easier for me.
Well, yeah, that's true. No,
Because
I was huge. I was a big
I
Emacs guy. I would argue Emacs versus Vi, till I was blue in the face years ago.
I started off with Emacs, but see, I started off with computers at the point where Emacs was so huge nobody wanted to run it, or nobody wanted you to run it. Because,
Right.
the 3 megs of memory that it took up
Yes.
actually was probably half the memory on the system.
Right,
To
right.
load
Because
your
it did
edit.
freaking everything.
Yeah. And it was cool, but I never learned all the shortcuts to it because I very quickly started playing on systems where I needed all the RAM I could get, and I also had a lot of system admins who just beat me up and said, "Vi is everywhere. Vi is always where you need it to be. You should learn, and you should use Vi." And I went,
Yep.
"Okay." And then I titled it "Virtually Impossible" because it was virtually impossible to use until you figured out all the damn shortcuts.
Right. Yeah, and that's if you don't use it regular enough, you forget them. At least I forgot them.
Quickly,
Yep.
like I've had to go search the internet and going, I know there's a way to replace all of the Windows carriage returns in one command.
Mm-hmm.
Crap, what was that? All right,
Yep.
I use 5 minutes on Google because I know it exists. It's not like I'm looking for something. I know what Windows people or what Linux people would call it because you have to do that Windows to Linux translation because
Right.
everybody doesn't call everything the same thing. So I can usually go find this stuff anymore. But knowing that it can be done is half the battle most of the time.
This is true. Yep, it's easy to find syntax if you know it exists.
Right. Um, well, that's cool. So how much stuff did you end up compiling?
I have now. Remember, this is ARM binary, so I have 61 meg, I think I said, of apps compiled. So it's a pretty decent chunk. What we're trying to do is I'm running off a snapshot. So in November, when OpenBSD 5.6 comes out, they will actually compile all the same stuff I'm doing now as part of the project. They just don't do it for snapshots, only releases.
Okay.
But half myself and actually 3 other individuals that were forum friends, for lack of a better description, 4 or 5, 6 years ago, when all these devices were latest and greatest technology, just all started playing with this at the same time. I think I mentioned last week about how one of the guys beat me to a post, and then he was already working with 2 other people. So we've all been trying to compile something different, and then if we run into any issues or errors, we're actually reporting it back. So when the release comes out in November, maybe something will be fixed, because we already ran into it. The problem though is that a lot of the newer applications don't have ARM support. A lot of them require GCC, which doesn't exist in the OpenBSD ARM platform. And basically, when we told them what we were doing, they just kind of laughed and said, "Okay, that's great. 20-year-old technology that nobody cares about." But it's fun. It's kind of neat. Just from this is my first experience with OpenBSD. I've been a Linux guy, pretty much all along. Obviously, it's still a Nix, so I'm not lost by any stretch of the imagination. But stuff's definitely organized differently, and the ports system is probably similar to Gentoo, I think, right? Because you build everything in Gentoo for the most part. And I don't know if they took it from BSD or what, but what you're able to do is they have a package manager, for lack of a better word. It's basically an add package command, and what it'll do is it'll search a folder for the package you're trying to install. If it exists, it will install it. If it doesn't, then you get an issue. But what you're able to do, kind of like when you add repos in Ubuntu, you can specify FTP sites, and it'll search all those FTP sites for the packages that you're looking for. And what me and my friends wanted to do was try to put all of the things we've been compiling on a common FTP site. So when I try to compile something that needs some dependencies that one of them had already completed, I don't have to blow 4 hours away, you know, compiling that when it would have already been readily available. Or in the case of the Dillo web browser, which I just started, I found out one of the other guys just finished. So, you know, that would have solved a little bit of an issue if I would have already seen that it was there. Or actually, when you send the compile command, it checks first to see if it exists, and it won't bother. I learned that when I tried to compile Bash because I wanted to use that as my shell, and it wouldn't compile, and I couldn't figure out why. And here it's because it was already done. So I asked you earlier in the day if you knew of anywhere that you could host for free an FTP server, an anonymous FTP server, because we wanted to store some of this information. And again, not a whole lot of space necessary. I mean, everything I've done so far is 60-some meg. You know, I'm sure it's the whole library's compiled isn't huge, but I really wasn't able to find anything. A lot of places, if you host with them, they give you stuff for free. My host does too, but my host does not allow anonymous access. You could log in by sending plain text username and password to be able to log in, but I don't want to do that because, of course, if it's on my web host, then now somebody has a plain text login name and password that they can do other evil things to my website. So I was trying to find something extra and really couldn't come up with anything.
Yeah, I could find all kinds of clients,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can find an article. I found an article with 10 free web hosting sites.
Yep.
But same thing, they probably won't let you. They're not going to let you do FTP.
Right. And then I want to say maybe one or two that I did find that they would give you. You could do a trial account for free, and then you find out after you create the trial account it's only for 2 weeks or something. And another one you could do for free, fully functional, but you only got 2 gigs of bandwidth a month transferred total.
Right.
So that's enough for me to put some stuff up there and store it. But you know, if we're actually going to be, you know, accessing it and using it pretty regular, then I was like, well, I don't even know if that's really going to work. But then I found out again with if the actual release comes out in November, well, you know, I could easily just zip this up and email it to the guys. It's only 60-some meg, or put it in my Google Drive or, you know, something like that to share, and not have to worry about it in so many months. But I just thought it was kind of cool because, you know, if you were working on some things and I was working on some things, we could just put each other's FTP repo in our packages site, and then when you go to install something, it would search for it. Kind of a neat way and very easy way of sharing apps. And the package system, you know, that's built in is pretty easy. It's basically a big tar zip.
Does it support SFTP?
I didn't see that anywhere. I don't know if if it did, that'd be a no-brainer then, because I already have that set up. But I don't remember seeing it anywhere.
Because you could do I was thinking you could do the SFTP thing and then like create an account, but that account could only touch the stuff in that SFTP directory.
Right.
Kinda.
Right.
Or, and this is another thing, another use for Docker. You could create a Docker image that has an FTP server, and everybody could connect to the Docker image, and then they would be jailed in the Docker image. They wouldn't be able to get out and do anything else.
Yeah, I thought about actually just spinning up a low-end VM to create that, but the problem then is if I do it at my house, then that account is now linked to my house's IP, and if, you know, I've been brute forced, you know, many times before, and I'd rather not have that happen again just for a month or two worth of work.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why I was trying to find a third party. You know, even one of those places where you can send your Raspberry Pi off somewhere, you know, with a 16 gig flash drive in it, and then you have that accessible, all of a sudden sounds really, really cool, because I'm like, dang, if I actually had that set up, you know, for however much a month it is, I remember it wasn't very much, you know, I'd be set. I'd just use that.
So I could put my 32 gigs like micro drive into my Raspberry Pi, send it off somewhere, and they'll host it for me?
Yeah, they got those the hosting farms. Um, I don't have the details in front of me; they're on my other machine, but yeah.
Huh.
And there's different data centers. So if you need to test against like things overseas, you can tell them put it in a specific data center or East Coast, West Coast, or yeah, it's pretty cool. And I've seen, obviously the advertisers advertise, but they show you the custom racks that they've built specifically for the Pis with the ventilation and cooling that rolls through them, and it looks like, I don't know, like an Oreo package slots where it's just got all these pies like stacked up, and then this whole like tray slides in, and all the power is like built in with cables and everything. It's really really cool looking. But yeah, I can't. There's a name for that service, like a generic name. Um, I can't think of what it is though, but it was something I was looking into doing for a while, but I only had the one Pi, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to give it up. But now that they got the B plus, I was thinking about buying another one of those for home and then sending my old version out and actually letting them host something so I can remote try stuff. I mean, it's convenient because even if you're setting up like in your case, I'll preface for you a little bit. You got your new firewall working, and you want to try it out. So now you actually have a machine somewhere not on your network that you have access to that you can attack yourself and try all kinds of stuff to see, if everything's working the way it's supposed to be working.
Yes. Except that my Time Warner cable box has a firewall built into it.
Oh.
So I'm kind of double firewalled. I need to get them to turn that off, though, because it's causing some issues. I don't have as many problems because I don't do as much gaming as you and Joe do. But the double natting thing gets to be a problem for some things. So
yeah, now, I thought we talked about that once before. I do the same thing, and I just put my firewall in the router's DMZ.
Right. Well, and I did that with my firewall too, but it still has a private IP address when I put it on the DMZ, and so that they don't give it a real IP address.
So you're
still natting. It's just like taking your router, your tomato router, and saying this is the DMZ machine and pointing it at a machine. It's still doing a NAT because your DMZ machine still has a non-routable address.
Yeah, that's weird. See, mine forwards the real IP.
Yeah. Now, I was interested to see, so are you done? Because I'll go on. I'll start talking about my firewall.
Yes. Okay, that's all I've done. I just compile stuff.
Walt's a compiling master now.
Yeah.
If you have compiling problems, just go to Jevack.com and ask him all your compiling questions, and he will.
I'll forward it right along to Google.
That's right. he'll go to let me Google that for you and send you back a wonderful link showing you how to Google for it.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said on the last podcast, had ordered a machine. It was in transit. It arrived at my house at 9:09 on Friday morning.
Nice.
I was on a call and couldn't get upstairs, but figured it was no big deal because I live, Walt and I live in the country, and people from UPS and FedEx just drop stuff on our front doorsteps, and there's little to no chance of anybody even being able to see it from the road, let alone steal it. To steal it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they never ask for a signature ever, especially on lower end items. This server, just so everybody knows, this server is only $200, $220 with shipping. So it's not an expensive piece of equipment that we need to protect with insurance ever.
Yeah.
They aren't going to lose that many of them to begin with. FedEx is pretty good about not losing stuff. And I think you're covered for $200 anyways, or up to there's a certain dollar amount you're covered up to, even if you don't buy the insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Check with FedEx to find out what the actual amount is. I'm not trying to say I know. But whatever. I go upstairs finally. The dogs went nuts. I'm like, okay, well, that's them being here, but I'm on this call, and I can't go upstairs and talk to somebody. I'm on the phone. I finally get upstairs, and there's a note on my door saying, you got to get a signature for this. And they shipped it with FedEx home delivery. Now, I worked at FedEx when FedEx started home delivery, and it wasn't FedEx that started it. It was RPS, which was Roadway Package Systems. They started this home delivery thing. The home delivery is interesting. It is not normal FedEx, just in case you're wondering. And I'm used to normal FedEx, where if I miss a package, no big deal, I'll go over to the plant, or whatever I call it a plant. It's not really a plant, I guess, but the shipping hub, the local shipping hub, and I'll pick it up there.
Yep.
So I call the 800 number to make sure that I'll be able to do that, because I was like, I don't even know where this says it was coming from Richfield, which isn't where I know of the FedEx office to be.
Right.
And I call them up, and I'm like, okay, what can I do? Because, this is at like 9:25, right? It's not like he's been gone for much more than 15 minutes at this point.
Yeah.
I found out later.
They could almost call the truck and tell them to turn around.
Yeah, I would have been really happy with the customer service had they done that, but they didn't. And then the woman informed me that, well, no, this is FedEx home delivery. It works differently. First of all, their delivery days are Tuesday through Saturday instead of Monday through Friday. So they do deliver on Saturday.
Mm.
The other thing is their office closes at 4:30 instead of 7, like the normal FedEx offices do. And the drivers don't normally get back until 8 p.m. when they leave their trucks. So there's not just a little time gap between them where I could even have a chance of getting it. There was no chance. I had to wait until Saturday morning to get the box, which sucked because that was my Friday evening plans. I was going to build a firewall. So UPS showed up, dropped off the memory for the box. So I had a 2 gig stick of memory, which was totally useless because I had nothing to put it in. And I had, later in the day, FedEx Traditional, the ones in the purple truck, stop by and drop off my wife's phone, leave it on my front porch, never bothered to ring the doorbell. The dogs didn't even notice. They were in and gone that quickly. And I go upstairs and I'm like, here is a $300, if I had to buy it off contract, a $300 phone sitting here on my front step. But you wouldn't leave the $200 computer.
Yep.
Doesn't make any sense. But it wasn't their fault. It was the shipper who said that it had to have the signature. So I sent a little piece of paper. I stuck it back on the window. Kicked myself because I didn't read the fine print. But anyways, I finally get the machine Saturday morning and put it all together, and then realized the hard drive I was going to use for it, I was going to use just a standard hard drive. Wasn't thinking about the fact that I was going to try to put a 3.5-inch hard drive in a 2.5-inch spot. And I went, where do I have a 2.5-inch drive that's not in a laptop that actually works? And I remember.
Could have called Walt's house. I got 3 right here.
I was close. I was close, and I was like, wait a minute. The machine that I set up OpenStack on, I think it's got a 128 gig drive. I wouldn't have had a regular hard drive at 128 gigs. It's got to be an SSD. So I pull it out, and it's sure enough an SSD. It's not only an SSD, but it's a Samsung 830 SSD, which for anybody who knows anything about SSDs, that's one of the top-end performing SSDs. Very nice box. A very nice SSD, which was in my desktop workstation that I was running for a while. So that's why it had the nice SSD in it. So I took that out. I used that for the hard drive on the box. Came across 8 gigs of memory that happened to be in my house, and decided that the 8 gigs beat the 4 gigs that I had bought. Well, the 2 gigs that came with it plus the additional 2 gigs. And so I swapped in the 8 gigs. So it now has 8 gigs of RAM.
Oh, wow.
It is a J1900 Celeron processor, so it's a quad-core machine with 8 gigs of memory. For as small as it is, it's 2 gigahertz processor speed. I don't think it has hyper-threading. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't remember it when we looked it up.
But booting off of that SSD with Ubuntu on it, which is what I put on it, is fast.
Oh, yeah.
Matter of fact, if I would turn off the post and just make it do a fast boot, I'd be probably sub 5 seconds. It's that fast.
Yep.
Which is really cool.
Yep. That's about what mine does.
Yeah. It's like, boom, up, okay, wow. And especially because I'm not bringing up any X windows or anything. It's strictly in server mode. So, hey, wow, okay, got it connected. Then I spent, so that was Saturday, because that's all started on Saturday morning, because they dropped it off again about 9 o'clock in the morning. So I got a pretty good early start on it. And it rained here Saturday, so I couldn't go do lawn work or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Had to work on my computers.
Dang it.
I was either going to do it Saturday or Sunday. There was no options there. So I sat there and I started playing around with it, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And I'm like, I really don't want an 8 gig firewall with 4 processors, because the current firewall is on a VM with 2 cores, and a gig of memory, and it's handling everything I need, and it never goes above 50% memory utilization. So why am I gonna put 8 gigs in? You know what? I could put KVM on this.
Nice.
So I reformatted it, reinstalled Ubuntu, and because I was installing off of a thumb drive to an SSD, it installed super fast. Oh, and it was USB 3 to USB 3 too. So really, really fast install. Not as fast as boot, but really fast install. Redid it, put it, and said, okay, make yourself a virtualization machine, so you'll have all the host software, all the KVM software on there. And so I now have a pfSense firewall running in a KVM VM with 2 cores and 2 gigs of RAM. And for no understandable reason, it now uses 71% of the memory in the box.
What?
I don't understand. I backed up the configuration in existing firewall, and restored that configuration to new firewall, because it was basically the same. It was like a point, or I went from like 2.1.4 to 2.1.5 because I just upgraded to the most recent version. And for some reason, I now use 71% of the memory, no matter what I shut off, because I don't have time to play with the. I will next week. Oh no, turn it back on again. Damn it. I have a watchdog process that's watching services, and I keep forgetting to tell the watchdog to stop turning on the OpenVPN stuff, but it keeps opening it back up, which is kind of annoying right now. But anyways, even when I turned that stuff off, though, it didn't drop down to the normal 512 meg, which it's only using on the other firewall. So I don't know. I'm imagining it's just not doing garbage collection because it doesn't need to, because it has the extra space. But it's kind of funny that it comes up when it does that. It still uses about the same CPU, maybe a little bit more of the CPU, because it's a little slower CPU. It's not a Core i7 CPU. It's a Celeron CPU.
Right.
But it's really running very slow. I don't have a big problem with buffer usage, because it's just my family. What else? It's been up for 2 days and 20 hours since I put it into production, basically. But I had a lot of fun trying to figure out how to get. I don't like the way I have it set up, really. I had to actually put an IP address on the interface to the internet. I did a non-routable address, but I still had to put an address on there to get KVM to use that interface, which isn't something I had to do with either VirtualBox or VMware.
I was going to ask you, how did you set up the network cards?
But for some reason, Ubuntu wouldn't acknowledge the link light in the OS, even though the link's up and it was flashy and everything was wonderful. It wouldn't acknowledge it, which was kind of annoying. So I ended up, to fix it, I tried all the things I could find on the net to fix it, and they all made sense, and I tried them, and it didn't make a difference. So I'm like, well, let's try this. Let's put an IP address on it. I put an IP address on it, rebooted the JVM, or the VM, just the VM, not the OS, and boom, Bob's your uncle, it now works. It'll give it an IP address inside the VM, which it wouldn't do before. It was really weird. Turn turn off that interface, or not turn it off, but unconfigure it, it won't work. Configure it, it's fine. I did that 2 or 3 times to prove to myself that it was just the fact that I configured the interface that was the only change.
Now, is that, I've never run KVM. I shouldn't say I've never run it. I haven't run KVM in so many years that basically I've never ran it.
Uh-huh.
Like in VirtualBox and VMware, you have different ways of accessing that network interface. You can do it bridged. You can do it, where it grabs outside world IPs. You can do it internally NATed, which still allows you to go through the host to get to the internet, but they're still on non-routables as far as inside. You can isolate them so they only work with other VMs on the same, VLAN. Is there something in KVM where maybe you just don't have it set to the equivalent of bridged to be able to just access it directly outside? Or
bridged is what works when I assign the IP address.
Oh, wow, that's weird then.
Now, the other thing is, and I think this may just be a problem with this board or chip, probably the chip. This chip doesn't support all of the virtual technologies because it's not really what it was designed for.
Right.
And the people at Intel are probably going, what the hell are you doing trying to run virtual machines on a J1900 Celeron chip?
Right.
It's really not what it was designed for. And my answer to them would be, if I could get it to work in Docker, I would just use Docker. But so I couldn't use pass-through mode. When I tried to use it, and this is the thing, having to suffer through Windows a lot lately, this is one of the things that I love about Linux and most open source projects. For the most part, and there are some blazingly bad exceptions to this rule, but for the most part, when something fails, it tells you that it failed.
Yes.
Not only does it tell you that it failed, but in a lot of situations, and again, I wouldn't even say most, but in a lot of situations, it actually tells you things like, can't establish the IP address because your chipset does not support pass-through mode, which is almost verbatim what the error said.
Right.
Your chipset does
the problem.
Your chipset does not support this. Stop it, you idiot, more or less.
Yeah.
And so I did. So then I switched to bridge mode. But from what I was reading, bridge mode should have, there was another mode that should have worked, and it didn't error. It just didn't work. And then I went to bridge mode, which I knew would work. And actually, what was cool was the bridge mode worked, and it got a different IP address. Like, I didn't put the non-routable address I used was, a 10.0 network. The router that I have puts a 192.168 address scheme in between itself and whatever you're connecting to it, in my case, the firewall. So my machine had a 10.0 address assigned to its interface, so it wasn't even seeing the router. When I brought this machine up in bridge mode, it now sees the router. It got an IP address from the router and got everything working and connecting. So it was a few hoops to get it working. And then I was worried about performance, and then I did all my performance tests, and I did speed tests and stuff like that, and it worked fine.
Cool.
It was amazingly easy, considering I was really expecting it to take a lot longer, and it didn't. Just because I thought I was going to have to do a lot more tuning and play with firewall rules and stuff like that. To pfSense credit, it worked fine. Now, before I chose this, and I'm sure some people are going to go, well, why'd you choose pfSense? Why not insert choice here? I did a lot of research to see if I wanted to try switching, and the only one that I thought of switching to, oh crud, I just forgot its name. The video that you sent me was pfSense versus Sophos?
I think so.
I think it was Sophos. Yeah, actually it was Sophos. And I'm watching these guys talk about this on the home server show. And the one guy did some nice screenshots of that, was talking through some screen shares that he was doing on Google+. It looks really cool. The problem is, and this was really, and they talked about it too, it's really short-sighted on Sophos' part. They limit the number of IP addresses not devices, but IP addresses, to 50.
Right.
And as Walt and I were talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, I want to switch to Sophos. Sophos looks so cool. I think I'm going to switch to it. And then they brought up but it only supports 50 IP addresses. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm close. I don't know if I've passed 50 yet, but I know I'm close. So I went to my new DNS mask servers that I set up, and I grepped the did a word count or line count. I'm sorry, on the file that lists, because it's one line per machine, and I have 47 hosts already defined.
Right.
And I know there's 3 of them that are irritating the hell out of me because I can't figure out which device they are so that I can add them. So they just show up as just MAC addresses.
Right.
And I'm like, what are you? Just tell me. So I don't know what they are. I'm assuming they may be TVs, which would make sense because I have a couple of smart TVs in the house that could be getting their IP address. That's them. And I just haven't identified that that's a Vizio IP address. And I haven't done any MAC address. I haven't done any real research to try to figure out what it is. It's just, hey, this wasn't on before, and this address wasn't there. It's on now. Wonder if that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's pingable. Let me go turn it off. Okay, it's no longer pingable. Okay, turn it back on. That's what it was. All right, add the IP address. But I had 47, and I'm like, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
3 of my friends show up. And it's not just bad enough that you can't have 50 IP addresses on the network. You can't have 50 IP addresses. So let's say, Walt, you're like me, and you're a consultant, and you have a test lab with about 15 different virtual machines for different clients or different situations. I have 2008 machines, 2012 machines, CentOS machines, all these different virtual machines just because I've needed them for different projects. If I tried to use, so I'm at 47, let's say 47 of my IP addresses are used. If I tried to use 4 of those machines in a week, each coming up and getting an IP address, that would not, the 5th machine would not work.
Right.
The 4th machine actually would not work because they hold that count for 7 days, which makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Right.
Okay, you want to block 51 machine, the 51st machine, what you want to block. Okay. But if I shut off 5 other machines, I shouldn't have to wait a week to get my use of that IP those allocated IP addresses back. So
right.
It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because when you said there was only 50, I thought, okay, I might be able to get away with that if you set your lease time to like 2 hours. So, it just gave it back up right away. But then if you ever tried to do any tracking or anything, it'd get crazy because...
Take those phones the TVs that I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time, the one in my bedroom is a smart TV. Most of the time, and probably for days at a time, we don't even touch Netflix on that TV or anything else on that TV that would actually connect to the network.
But it's pulling an IP.
But it's pulling an IP. So because once every 7 days, I'll say we probably do watch something on Netflix on that TV, I would never would never fall out. Even though most of the time, 20 hours or so, that's probably 22 hours or so a day, that TV doesn't have any need for an IP address. So I can't use it for anything else. It was just, it was too much of a limitation for me.
Yeah. Now, I was going to ask you, were those 50 DHCP IPs, but you could still use the other 100 statically, or did you just have 50?
No, you had 50. Period.
Because I'd almost be able to deal with 50 DHCP because I do have that big, various VMs and whatnot, but they're all statically assigned. So, I'd maybe be able to get away with only having 50 dynamic.
Nope. As soon as it connects to the firewall to go to the internet, it records it as an IP address and holds it for 7 days.
Yeah, there's no way that would happen then. No, it's just nope.
Right.
I mean, heck, you bust out that old ZAURUS for compile some OpenBSD, and next thing you know, you got IP tied up for 7 days. Of course, it might take that long to compile, but
Right. You may not be able to test what you were trying to compile for 7 days, so it may not really be a problem, but...
Right. Yeah, no, no way that'd work here.
And it wouldn't work here either, so I was just like, okay, I'm going to go back to pfSense. I know it. I have a love-hate relationship with it. It needs some polish, but it works. It's definitely one of the easiest firewalls to set up if you're not trying to do anything super complicated. Like if you just need to do port forwarding for your games and some other stuff, that part's really pretty smooth. It's trying to do VPNs and other stuff where the documentation isn't quite what it should be.
Yeah.
I believe that it works, and if I was still configuring firewalls and it had used a more current version than 1.0 of OpenVPN, I would probably understand what the problem is and be able to fix it. But I hate fighting with. I have to fight with certificates all day at work. I don't want to fight with them when I get home.
Yeah.
I just want it to work.
Yep. Oh, that's why I'm still pretty happy with my switch from DDWRT to Tomato. I still think it's because the Tomato is compiled against the old SDK5 libraries, which is what my generation of router was designed around. But I've had no issues since I switched over a little over a week already, at least.
Now that's on your ASUS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, because
you need to. So it's just. Is it just the current Tomato, or is it some special?
No, there's the current Tomato has. Oh boy, I'm sorry. The official Tomato project hasn't been developed for years. Like the Linksys E3000, the 2000 for sure. Maybe the 3000 was the last official Tomato supported device, and then from the original design team, and then Toastman forked a version. Shibby, I believe it is SHIBBY, forked the version, which is the one I use. There's a new one called, is it Tomato Next or something like that, where they are redesigning the interface to be more use more modern web standards. So there's at least 3, maybe 4 mainstream forks. I can't remember if I know Kong does a WRT build, but I can't remember if he still does a Tomato build. But at any rate, and then they all focus on different things. So like Toastman's Bleeding Edge, he'll have the latest and greatest in it. I'd be doing firmware updates weekly, sometimes even more so. The Shibby one is a little bit more stability, I guess, for lack of a better description.
Which one was that? I'm sorry.
Shibby is SHIBB, I believe.
SHIBBY. I just got it. Tomato by Shibby.
Yeah. And his main site's tomato.groove.pl, groov.pl. But what's interesting is like DDWRT, they use a build source from the newest router out, so basically it supports everything, and then tweaks that build for older models because the code's already in there. It just might need massaged a little bit to not show certain displayed features or whatever it is. The problem you run in with that, or I've ran in with that in the past, is it's using updated Wi-Fi drivers that don't always work or as good with the older chipsets. So I've had Wi-Fi issues pretty consistently. And it's being compiled against a SDK version 6, which, again, does not have as good compatibility with the older equipment that was built around the SDK5 structure. So I've had problems with that. And the Shibby build, he actually builds against 5 and 6. So if you want to run the latest and greatest with all the newer drivers and everything, you can download the exact same version. As far as like features and whatnot, it's still like 1.2.1, but it's the version 6 build. So you'll have maybe more optimized, maybe newer Wi-Fi drivers, whatever. But he still builds it against the version 5, which in my opinion is just it's more stable. So once I found that out, I put that on, and it's just been super. My range is much better, or it's what it was, a year ago when I originally bought it and was running the older firmware. Funny enough, I haven't had any lockups, I haven't had any reboots. The couple of the cool features of Tomato versus DDWRT are more important to me than I thought. So there's some real-time bandwidth tracking, real-time destination tracking, so I can watch a particular IP and like what sites they're going to. There's some other cool stuff that I found useful.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I learned about pfSense is I'm supposed to be able to, without having to use NTOP, because I was running, and I'm actually running NTOP on this machine now, the new Firewall, and I was running on the old one too. NTOP, for those not aware, NTOP is a network version of TOP, so it basically tries to do all the same things that you would do with TOP, seeing network usage and from a networking perspective. But there's supposed to be another way where I can easily see what's hogging up bandwidth. And at some point, I need to play around with some quality of service stuff.
Yeah.
Because I would like to start shaping some quality of service, specifically around my crash plan stuff. I would like to set up quality of service rules that, while everybody is awake, limits crash plan to like a meg total across all the machines, so that I can turn back on the nice feature of the continuous backups, because most of the time all we're backing up is a meg or two.
Right.
We're not. It does incremental backups continuously, so it's not that big a deal. Instead of now I have to run it, and it has to run, and if it has to run at night basically, because I can't limit the bandwidth. I don't want to limit the bandwidth if I need it, but I want to do quality of service. So if there's something on the network that's using the network, it will be a lower priority and therefore run slower when I'm doing that. Yeah. So if I'm trying to watch a movie on Netflix, it won't get jittery, or it won't drop to 640 by 480 or 340, whatever the 480 by 330 or something like that. Whatever standard def is. It won't drop my video down to standard def like it did the other night on my wonderful Chromebook.
Yeah, I did. I ran. That was one of the reasons why I started running DWRT, because they had the best quality of service for a long time. And I used to run Vonage, and if I was playing Warcraft, it would suck so much bandwidth that my phone calls would either drop or be broken up or whatever. So I set up rules similar to what you said. As long as Vonage wasn't in use, I get full bandwidth. As soon as that service got triggered, I got knocked down to 70%, and then it had the 30%, which I, through trial and error, figured out is all it needed for a clean call consistently, and it worked pretty good. The now we're running, and something else too. I was gonna say the Obahai SIP routers now support Google Voice again, so I hooked mine back up. And for whatever reason, maybe I just don't do as much as bandwidth-intensive devices, or maybe it just didn't need as much bandwidth, but I haven't had a quality of service that, and it's still been working good.
Yes, and I'm still debating whether I want to spend the $40 to get one of those to hook up to my Google Voice number. I really think I do.
I bought one, so you can see it when it comes in tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I was really looking more. Well, see, I was going to go for I was going to get, what is it, $70 is the next one up.
For the 202.
Because I want to hook up one for my business Google Voice account, my work Google Voice account, versus my personal Google Voice account. Because I set up a Google Voice for my business cards for work. And that comes to my cell phone. The big problem that I have is that means I've only got one cell phone. And you used to be able to put a phone number on more than one Google Voice number, and you can't do that anymore. So, which really sucks, because I can't have my wife's and my Google Voice numbers fall back to the house now. Well, I can, but I can't change. If I remove the home number, I can't put it back on. But because it's already there. So I set it up before they put the rule in. And so I could assign. My wife and I both have Google Voice numbers. I set our Verizon phones up to go to voicemail on Google Voice versus Verizon.
Mm-hmm.
The problem now is, and I learned this just by taking my own cell phone out, or when I put my cell phone into the other system, it wouldn't take the phone because it was already an assigned forwarding phone number.
Oh, so you can't have two Google Voice accounts go to the same forwarded number.
The same single number.
Okay, I thought you meant you couldn't have Google Voice go to more than one phone. I'm like, yeah, you can. Mine goes to 3.
No, you can, and
Yeah,
definitely
okay.
you can. And for you, you're probably going, since they have you locked away in the basement.
Yes.
I'm assuming one of those numbers that your phone rolls over to, or your Google Voice number rolls to, is your office, right?
Right.
Which is what I would do it to too. But for me, it wasn't a big deal. I just switched over. My Google Voice number for work rolls over to my cell phone, just because that was where the need was greater. And everybody had my cell phone number, and nobody ever called my Google Voice number to call me on my cell phone.
Right.
They all just called because I've had my cell phone number for flipping ever. I realized I've had that number for 14 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've had my home phone number 15 at the old house, a year at this house, and I brought it from the apartment, so it's probably 16 or 17 years too.
Yeah. Now my home number has changed, but that's okay because if we didn't have kids, we would get rid of the home phone.
Mm-hmm.
We've already talked about that.
Yeah,
and
actually, I'm thinking about adding it for the same reason because I got one on the way.
Right. Yeah, I just always want a phone to be there. Now that might switch over if I get that dual line OBHI. That might switch over to being the OBHI instead of paying Time Warner $40 a month.
Yes.
For a home phone, and do the E911. What did you find out the E911 was? It was
$15 a year.
Yeah.
Which is really nothing.
I'll pay $15 a year for E911.
Yeah, and it works. I haven't used it with the OBHI, but I used it with Vonage because Vonage had E911, and I did have to call once, and it worked just fine. So.
Right. Yeah, because it's basically just saying this phone number is at this address.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're never going to really move it. Although you could move it. You're not going to.
Right, yeah. If I happen to call I'm in Detroit or something, and I call, well, they're going to send people here to Ohio.
Yep. I was going to talk about setting up. I found a new way to set up OpenStack. It's called RDO.
Yeah.
But we're going kind of long, so I'm going to cut this off tonight, and we'll talk about that next week. But I did find a new way to do it. We'll talk about what my issues were. They were kind of fun. It was laughable after I figured out what the hell the problem was, but figuring out the problem was far more difficult than it needed to be. There was lots of confusion by lots of novices who didn't understand what was really going on in the back end, and that just made things more confusing because you have people who understand the product and are trying to explain it, and it was just that the people reading it weren't understanding what they were trying to say. It wasn't that bad. But do you have anything else to talk about real quick?
Nope, that's it for this week.
All right, everybody. We will talk to you again next week. But don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter at Linux Install. And we have an awesome Google Plus community that is growing all the time. There's new people picking us up on the old plus.google.com/plus Linux install net community. Go check it out. Still wish people would post out there. It's not just us. I post out there all the time, but
yes, you do.
Other people don't necessarily. But that's okay. But if you have stuff to post and you want to post it there and it's Linux related, go ahead and post there. It should be open for everybody to post to. That was what the community site was for. And so go ahead and do that. Walt is over at Jevack.com when he's not doing a podcast with me. And I am over at DevOpsMastery.com. And speaking of DevOps, I will be talking at Ohio Linux Fest. Walt?
Yes, the official schedule is up.
The official schedule is up. I now know that I am presenting between 4 and 5 p.m. on Saturday in room 230/231, which sounds like a big room. I don't know. But Greg, previous host of this podcast, is presenting his show on Android development on Linux, which I've seen the slides. It looks pretty good. That'll be from 2 to 3 in the same room. So he's from 2 to 3, and I'm from 4 to 5. So I don't know who's in the middle, but, come and watch all three.
Yep. I plan to be there to heckle y'all.
That's right. That's what I expect. Come heckle me. If you're in the audience, come heckle me. Come to OhioLinux Fest. It's in Columbus. Columbus is a beautiful town. Let's see, that's the end of October. You may still be able to go into the hills and see the beautiful trees as they're changing, if you're not from an area where it gets beautiful trees changing. What else is going on that time? There'll probably be some Oktoberfest stuff going on downtown. There was a beer fest going on last year. If you like beer, there is a flea market type or food market type thing going on across the street every Saturday. Anyways, so you can go over there. We went over and had an awesome lunch across the street.
Yep.
So we got really good food for pretty decent price. And it's a lot of fun. Just come out and have fun learning about Linux, talking about Linux, or in my case, I'm going to be talking about DevOps. And come heckle me on the DevOps stage there that I'll be taking over. Like I said, from 4 to 5. So what should everybody go do, Walt?
Go install some Linux.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
I have to find the stop button.